Hello and welcome back to the Rugby Pod with another video brought to you by our friends at Go.Compare.
Right, mate. A couple of days to go till we start the Autumn Nations Series. What are you most looking forward to?
Springboks coming over is the big one, isn't it? It feels like what they've done over the last sort of 6 weeks in the Rugby Championship in terms of being able to win it, create even more squad depth while sort of tinkering around with their squad. Potentially, it looks like a little bit of an evolution of the squad in a sense, doesn't it? You know, no Bongi, no Mapimpi, Faf de Klerk, LaRue. So you're sort of thinking, is that maybe the start, or who knows, you know, with Rassie, could well bring them back in for next year and freshen them up. And there'd be a lot of guys, you know, especially Bongi, who would have played a lot of rugby in terms of over the last few years. So maybe it's just give him a little bit more time off and get him back. But I think it's if you compare, say, like this autumn series, this Quilter Nations Series compared to previous ones, I think previously, 10 years ago, say, like the All Blacks were the main draw. And like if you're going to spend your money going to a stadium, you'd probably save it and go for an All Blacks game. Whereas I'm not quite sure this time around. I feel like like the Boks are the main show in town, aren't they? And that just reflects 2 World Cups on the spin, Rugby Championship back-to-back, star players galore. So it just feels like seeing where they go. And I think they've got like big fixtures as well, haven't they? In terms of they got like a bit of a showpiece at Wembley in terms of against Japan. Then they've got sort of France. For me, I think that's the game of the autumn. France, South Africa. Rematch of the World Cup quarterfinal. Lots of sort of people knowing the French, they'll be sort of looking for some payback, looking for some revenge. And I just think like that for me was one of the best games that was ever played, that World Cup quarterfinal. And to sort of have that in the same stadium, I think that's for me is the game of the autumn.
What do you think the Springboks' biggest strength is?
I suppose the easier question is where's their weakness? And the answer is I can't really find one. I think what they've been able to do over the last couple of years is create that style, because I think you look at 2019, they won that World Cup by overpowering teams and mauling and kicking teams to death in terms of basics. You look at 2023, there was a little bit more. And when you've got Aronson, Colby, Jesse Creel, you know, LaRue, Faf de Klerk, all the Grant Williams coming, like you can't not sort of move your game on as well. So what they've done really well and what I've loved is that they've developed their game in terms of their set piece is still as strong as anybody's. You know that when they get in the 22, they're coming around the corner with big, powerful runners. But what I've loved since Tony Brown has come in, he's made a big difference in terms of they've almost got a bit of an all-court game now in terms of if they need to move the ball wide and have their X-factor players on the ball, then they've got that ability. But they've also got the ability to tighten things up. If they get into a bit of an arm wrestle, like you saw in that semi-final against England, basically, right, England played a perfect match in terms of executing their game plan, keeping the game tight for 65 minutes. But then you bring on the bomb squad and you bring on Pollard to come and kick you a couple of crucial goals, turn the screw at set piece, and you end up getting into a World Cup final and winning it. So for me, it's kind of like the easier question is where are the weaknesses? And for me, I can't see many because they're creating squad depth. And if you look at a position which is vital to them is 10, and they've probably got to make a bit of a call on it, but they've got so many options in how they want to play. If they want to play this expansive game plan, you bring in your Labok, your Sasha Feinberg, Ngona Zulu. If you want a game where it's going to be nice and structured and you want somebody to know the game plan and kick you your goals, then you've got Andre Pollard, who's in that squad, who's going to be there or thereabouts come the next World Cup. So for me, it's kind of like that's where the most impressive thing is that they've got so many ways in which they can play now.
Does seem to be like a bit of a master plan from Rassie that they do have several ways they can play rugby now. They've almost got key players in positions that they can swap in and out to kind of change how they play, kind of how you said there, you know, if they aren't having so much success like they have done traditionally in the scrum, then they can have a Sasha Feinberg and then start playing that.
Do you know what? Like, that's a really good point, because like Rassie says it himself. It says like it's not a starting 15 or a 23 or a squad. It's like everybody's in there, because it's not like you don't necessarily start. Maybe sometimes you don't start your strongest front row, or maybe you know that the game may get tight when it gets to 65 minutes against an England, against a France, against a New Zealand. So you think, right, well, you pack your bench accordingly. And he's been so instrumental in terms of using his bench, in terms of, so if he wants to play this expansive style, then you're probably more suited to playing a Grant Williams and a Lebok or a Sasha Feinberg, Mgonazulu. So you sort of think, right, well, those are the guys that start, but then you have in reserve, you've got your guys like your Reinachs, your Pollards, in terms of in reserve, to just think, right, well, that's another way we can play as well. So for me, it's kind of like you've got the perfect mix then. And it's like he's not apologetic in saying, well, sometimes I'm not going to start with my best players or who I deem my best players. And I just think he's just mastered it, hasn't he? In terms of like, he's just got it right. And it's difficult to argue against it.
It's even for example, see Khaleesi, the captain, the focal point of the team, he comes off after 60 minutes. After Clerk, who has been out of the squad, he's been playing in Japan and stuff, but he's come in and he's got him as like he's got him around the squad. He almost doesn't discard players like other coaches do. You're gone and that's it. He brings them back in, keeps them as part of the squad.
You make a good point. Like Khaleesi, right? For me, Khaleesi is one of the most inspirational, best captains that the game has ever seen. So you think, right, well, you would think if the statement I've just said, which I don't think anybody would disagree with me with, surely he has to play 80 minutes every week. If that's what you're saying, is one of the most inspirational captains of all time, most successful captains of all time, he plays 80 minutes every week. But it's almost, he's built so much of a squad and a leadership group and a belief in the group that if this amazing player and captain comes off after 55, 60 minutes, they've got total belief in the rest of the squad or the player coming on to just continue finding a way to win. And they've built enough leadership in terms of your Pollards, your Dearlandis, your Creels, your Colbys, your Steph Totoys, your Malcolm Marks, your Bongies and things, Etzebeths, to have on the field so that if you lose your captain, so to say, it doesn't really affect it that much. And I think that's, again, you talk about the most impressive thing about them. I'd say that's probably up there, that you're able to bring off your most inspirational leader at 55 minutes and still get games won by a point. It's not like they're bringing him off when they're 20, 30 points up, bringing him off in big games, World Cup finals, when the game's in the balance.
Do you think the stability of how long Rassie's been in place for helps them as well? He's been there since 2018. I think he's the second longest serving Tier 1 head.
Yeah, the honest answer is yes. Stability. It's a little bit like success breeds stability as well, doesn't it? If when Rassie's will know this, if he hadn't won a game in 18 months or whatever, then he wouldn't still be here now. Do you know what I mean? So it kind of, but when you win back-to-back World Cups and rugby championships and get to number one in the world and everything they've achieved, very, very unlikely you're going to change your coach. But what he's done really well, a little bit like what we talked about in the pod a little while ago about like when United was strong, he's tinkered around with his backroom staff, so he's kept things fresh. Because if you've got the head guy as, his voice is always going to be there or thereabouts. So he's going to want to have a fresh voice in terms of your Tony Brown and letting Jack Nima go to Leinster. And I just think he's tinkered around with that side of it. Aled Walters was there, now he's with, went on the Lions in the summer and things. So I just think it kind of just, I think that's, again, is something that people underestimate. It's just about the 15 or 23 players on the pitch, but he's been able to do that as well. And the consistency that and the length of time he's had there, has allowed him to be able to tinker around with squads, get to know players and build. This South African team for me, it's not a national team. He's built a club there. Not every other team you look at, maybe you could make an argument for sort of Ireland, New Zealand a little bit. But for me, this South African team is not an international team. It's a club team and it's a club feel. And that is just when your head guy has done that, and they love him as well. All the players love him, in terms of he makes things right. They travel with their families, and their families, if they're away for long periods, are together. It's a proper sort of club and community feel there, and they're getting everything that they deserve at the minute.
Devil's advocate. I know I asked you about the weaknesses and you skirted around the issue, and you must be worried about the South African fans in the comments. But maybe only one out and out number 8 in Jasper Wiese. Same again with only one sort of specialist fullback in Damien Willemse. Are they maybe lacking in some specialism around the number 8 and the 15 shirt? Yeah,
potentially. But I think I have to say I love Wiese. I played against him for a couple of years, and I think he is just ridiculously good.
Wrecking ball.
But again, like, I love that he's in the team for one reason, for absolutely ending people in defense and getting over the top of people in attack. So don't make life complicated for him. Just get him, so first of all, he's absolutely brilliant, right? Now, yeah, I suppose the argument is if he goes down, does the balance of your back row get shifted around with, obviously, what they've got Dutoy and Khaleesi. And I think that's what works for having Visa in the group as well, because he doesn't have, you've got those two absolute workhorses who just get through so much work. But the argument could be if he went down, the balance could be shifted a little bit in terms of he may have to move. Khaleesi's played 8 a couple of times, isn't he? I don't think Sia is a natural 8. He's more of your 6, 7, your sort of your grafting and workhorse type back rower. Quagga Smith probably isn't quite big enough to really be 8 against the top teams. So you could probably argue that is a little bit of a case. You'd probably want to keep him as fit as possible and wrap him up in cotton wool. But they'll probably just unearth somebody else in terms of coming through anyway, And I think you look at then fullback. Fullback's a little bit more, I suppose they've got a little bit more of a luxury there because they can move a couple of people around in terms of Aronson could slot in there. Colby could, Colby's played there a little bit. So you're not, I think that's easier to manage. And, Fassi is going to be there or thereabouts as well. And they've liked him, haven't they, in terms of, because, Willemsen only came in for that New Zealand game because Fassi went off early doors and then ended up absolutely sort of knocking it out of the park. So I think that side of it, there's a lot more solutions to find for it. But I think, yeah, probably 8 is probably the ones, if you could say there's a weakness in the squad depth, probably looks at 8.
So we talked about Springboks consistency. Well, a team who've maybe been criticised because of their consistent selections and sort of playing it safe. Ireland, what do you make of them?
For this November, I know they've got a few injuries, right? And they've got a couple of centres down and there's lots of talk about them being an Asian team and maybe the squad depth maybe just not quite being where it has been. But I still think for the here and now, and this is ultimately what we're talking about in the here and now, this is a squad. When you look through, if you get everybody fit and available and, that's a squad, which if the World Cup was tomorrow, you'd fancy that team to do unbelievably well. Take away the quarterfinal hoodoo type of
as long as you didn't have to play.
Yeah, as long as you had to go basically straight to a semi-final, they'd be all right. But I think you look at that team and I just think, well, Porter, Sheehan, Furlong, whether you play Tyburn in the second row or whether you go McCarthy and Ryan Baird or James Ryan, Henderson, Doris, Conan, Van der Fleer, Byrne. So it's as good as anything. Gibson Park, Crowley / Pendergast, Aki, Ringrose, Henshaw, Keenan, James Lowe, Hansen. If I'm saying to you that the World Cup is played tomorrow, that's as good a squad as you want in terms of that. So in terms of the Quilter Nations Series, I think they're in a good spot, minus obviously a few injuries. But where I think Ireland have got to be careful, and again, when you compare this autumn to previous autumn or next autumn, it's slightly different because of the World Cup rankings, and everybody's going to want to be in that top 6. And I think Ireland will be fine, in terms of even if they sort of have a disastrous autumn. But I just think it's really interesting that after this autumn, I think it's a big challenge for that Irish team to sort of develop and really get some strength and depth in key positions. Because you look at probably 1, 7, 9, 13, they're probably a little bit short. Whereas we just talked about the South Africans, probably 8 is the only position they're short and they can still move a couple of pieces around. So I think when you've got 4 or 5 really key positions in your team where you look a little bit short, if you have an injury or two, that's when they've got to have to step up and find some players and find out about people. So they've got some tough games as well in terms of going to Chicago, playing New Zealand, back to play Japan, Australia and New Zealand Australia and South Africa to finish. So they've got a tough autumn. And I think they're fine in terms of their ranking in the top 6. But I just think it's probably getting to that stage where I think Andy Farrell will know that they're going to be okay in this autumn. I think it's a really challenging autumn for them. But I think he's probably getting to the point where he's seeing, right, over the next 18 months after this autumn, it has to be a bit of a a process of, can we create a little bit more depth in the way that South Africa have found some gems.
Do you think it's an issue, the fact that he has so many players from one club?
I think I think it's really dangerous territory that we get in, because Ireland have been almost the standard bearers for so long, haven't they? Mm-hmm. And most of the time, they've had players from Leinster in there. Most of the time, whenever squads are picked or teams are selected, it's like, okay, well, it's 12 Leinster players plus Tadhg Beirne and it was Conor Murray and
Peter O'Mahony.
Peter O'Mahony. So like Ian Henderson, the odd few. So when they were winning Grand Slams and championships, getting to number one in the world, beating New Zealand in New Zealand, nobody said that it was an issue then. So why would it be an issue now? Now, if the players in Leinster aren't good enough, or there's better players from Munster, Connacht, and Ulster, then absolutely it becomes an issue if you're picking just the same players because they're from the group. But I think as it stands at the minute, I think it's really difficult to say that there's too many people from Leinster because of the success that they've had. And I would almost argue that, well, that's a big reason why they've had success, is because they've had a lot of consistency. And then, ultimately, if you bring Tadhg Beirne, Peter O'Mahony and Conor Murray coming off the bench, then they're only going to add to a brilliant group already. So, but it will be interesting to see how things go now, because again, sort of Leinster have had a little bit of a difficult start to the year. Nowhere near as strong as they would normally be in seasons gone by. So I do think it's a really interesting one. Ireland's a fascinating one, because I actually think in this autumn, if you're previewing their autumn, they've got as tough a fixture list, but they've got a strong squad as well, minus a couple of injuries. But I do think that the next 18 months is huge for Irish rugby in terms of developing those numbers before a World Cup. England's a really interesting one, because England they're kind of on the cusp of that top 6 ranking. And I think it's important to say, as things stand at the minute, it's kind of the World Cup in 2 years' time is top 6 go into the 6 groups of 4. So it'll be top 6. So as it stands, South Africa, Ireland, New Zealand, France, England and Argentina are the top 6. Then it works out that the next 6, so 6 to 12, which are Australia, Scotland, Fiji, Italy, Georgia, and Wales, go in underneath them. So you want to be numbers 1 to 6 to give yourself the best option. England have got the opportunity to really get themselves and solidify that and have really good autumn. They've also got the potential to have, if they don't get it quite right, against a Wallabies team who we saw how good they came in terms of the end of the Lions series, in terms of certainly at the start of the Rugby Championship.
And last autumn,
winning Allianz Stadium. So you think, yeah, there's potential for them to be, if they get it wrong, especially in terms of your teams that they're playing, in terms of,
Fiji
and Argentina, could turn into really big games, you know what I mean, in terms of those world ranking points. But I think England can have a really good autumn. I think they're playing the Wallabies at a good time without a couple of key players in terms of Hooper and Ikitau and Skelton. And so you think, right, if you're going to play the Wallabies, when would you want to play them with or without those players? And the answer is pretty easy, isn't it? Mm. So I think they'll go okay there. Fiji would be, as we know, will be tough, but I fancy them to win there. Then they got the All Black game, which is a huge game. And then you've got Argentina to finish off. So they've got potential there. And I have to say, I think I like the squad. I think I agree with you in terms of the challenges around 12, in terms of the numbers of people. You've basically got a Jomo and Dingwall, who I have to say both are brilliant club players. And Dingwall in particular, when he's played for England, has done really well, hasn't he? Now, the issue you've got is that they haven't got many caps between them, which I'm not necessarily, I don't see as much of a problem if they're playing really well as Dingwall and Jomo are. You think, right, we'll get them in. I think the question around you want to play, I think you play Lawrence at 13. I don't think you move Lawrence into 12, because I think he's a world-class 13. I think he's a good or very good 12. Then Slade back in the mix and things. Obviously, no Owen Farrell, who would have felt like it could have been a really interesting selection to give a little bit of depth to that. I'm not saying starting Owen Farrell by any stretch, but you sort of, do you have him in the squad to cover 10, 12 on the bench potentially to help your Dingwalls and your Jomos in the squad and in training and things. So an interesting call. But then I think, the 8 is a bit more of an issue for England. I think they'll want, obviously Tom Willis, the news of Tom Willis leaving, he will probably, if he stayed or not, maybe, that's, who knows what the conversations were with Steve Borthwick, but you think he would be like a really good fit in that England squad at the minute, wouldn't he? Dynamic, especially the way England want to play. I think you saw in terms of the way that they played towards the end of the last Six Nations in the summer tour, they look a little bit more like a dynamic team, and they've got the fans back on board, haven't they? In a sense. So you think, right, can they build on that this autumn? They've got games which, on paper, they should be able to build on, with Australia missing players and Argentina and Fiji and the All Blacks and things. But I fancy they've got a good squad there. I do. I think you work out, okay, 12, they're a little bit inexperienced, but they've got tons of excitement in terms of and pace in terms of their back three and X factor everywhere you look. 15, I'd say, probably is more of I would say if I was going to look at that England squad, I would say maybe 15 is more of your issue, because let's just say, it looks like Freddie Stewart is going to play, doesn't he? Because he's the only 15 in the squad.
Definitely not Marcus.
I think it's a big call, isn't it? I mean, Marcus hasn't played any rugby at 15 so far this season. Obviously, Quins have struggled a little bit and things. I actually think I've been quite impressed by Freddie Stewart at the start of the season as well. I think he's been good. You know that he's the best in the world at catching a high ball. The issue is if you get an injury with him, I think Furbank's injury, and it's a strange one, because Furbank, it's not like George Furbank has been like an absolute regular in England and is like, but what he gives you that bit more, gives you that pace option at 15, that counter-attacking threat. Clearly not as good as Freddie Stewart under a high ball, but, very much adequate under a high ball at that level. Second playmaker. So I think he gives you an awful lot in your team, which potentially, with him being injured, you have to maybe cover that in terms of Marcus covering 10, 15. But I think they'll go Freddie Stewart, because I think he's been in good form for Leicester. Yes, it's clear and obvious. His limitations, but his strengths as well. So you kind of got to find a solution in that. But I do fancy that England I think England will have a good series.
And maybe some positivity in Wales. We've got Steve Tandy in place. The squad is sort of maybe looking a bit like it's got a bit more star power for the first time in a while, maybe.
Yeah, I think Steve was the right man for that in terms of taking that job, because I think the dynamic of the squad, the age profile and the group that's there at the minute probably needs a coach who is going to, so probably not, and I mean this in the thing, not like a super coach, like a Checker, a guy, like those type of guys. It's kind of like, right, a guy who's going to really make the environment a growing and learning environment. Sometimes that just, you walk into a new environment under a new coach and it needs to feel new as well. I like the look of the back line. I like that they've picked on majority of players on form, and they look like you said, Reece Zammit being back is obviously huge news for Wales, because it'll give people confidence, but it'll also give Wales a bit more of a scare factor as well. And even if he's not absolutely 100% back to his best in terms of this autumn, it just, with his name on the team sheet or on the squad, just puts you a little bit more on high alert. Front five will be the big issue. Can they compete against your Argentinas, South Africa's and New Zealand's, which clearly are a tough game. I'd almost split Wales's autumn campaign into two. I'd say your preparation week, your Argentina week, and your Japan week are your vital weeks, where you zone in and you really add a little bit more focus in terms of, are Argentina a better team than Wales at the minute? Clearly, by some distance. But would they hold the same fear factor as a South Africa or New Zealand? Probably not in that sense. And if Wales can get at them early, have a really good preparation week, and grow in confidence in the game, I think they'll believe that there's a victory to be had there. But as we've mentioned about the world ranking points, that Japan game in week 2, for me, and I think that's what's really, really important, comparing this autumn compared to other autumns, you'd think other autumns, you'd compare it and you'd say, right, Wales, Japan, probably, with other games going on, you'd think like that probably falls by the side a little bit. But this one, with Wales being 12th, Japan 13th, a Japan victory then, and all of a sudden Wales could find themselves in a pool with South Africa, Argentina, Wales. You know what I mean? And then all of a sudden you're thinking, it's a pretty tough ask to get out of that, even with the new format. So I just think, there's certainly a bit more positivity about it in terms of the squad selection. Obviously, big news being about that they're going to look to go to 3 teams in a couple of years' time with different funding models and bits and pieces. So who knows what that's going to have. It always seems like it's a soap opera in Welsh rugby. But I do think that that's a little bit more of a positivity, a bit more of a positive vibe going into this Quilter Nations Series.
Go.Compare celebrates the smart decisions fans make, both in the stands and at home. So with that in mind, mate, which number 10 do you think will be the MVP for their team this autumn?
Wow, that is... Do you know what? I was thinking about this, right? How many teams in this, or who are playing in this Autumn Nation Series, in this Quilter, how many teams in this Quilter Nation Series would you say are absolutely nailed on to who their 10 is for the next World Cup?
1, Scotland.
Yeah. I'd be hard pushed.
Maybe France, they have a clearer idea.
Yeah,
but
I would say Scotland 100%. I was thinking France would be hard pushed. I think it'd be a surprise if Intermac wasn't 10 in the next World Cup for them. But you look at, let's just go through them, right? Let's say New Zealand. Mwanga's coming back for the next World Cup, but isn't available.
He's not back till next year. The end of next year, I think.
So you've got Mackenzie and Barrett, effectively. Probably both are not absolute natural out-and-out 10s, sort of 10, 15s. And it's been a bit of a toss-up between who plays there. Australia, with the injury to Looseo, you've got, Edmund, you've got Liner, you've got, if Looseo comes back fit, James O'Connor's played there a little bit. Wales, obviously, is very much up in the air. Sheedy, Costello, Dan Edwards, those guys. England's a big one. It's like, where do you go with England? You've got almost too many good players in terms of, Owen Farrell not in the mix at the minute, but George Ford has been brilliant. Seems to be getting better with age. Finn Smith, Marcus Smith. So you sort of think, and you look at the team that we're saying is almost the standard bearers for World Rugby at the minute in the Springboks. And I'd say even those guys, probably over the last couple of weeks, Sasha Feinberg and Ngwana Zulu has probably edged ahead. But you could make an argument for sort of him being the starting 10, Lebock being the starting 10, Pollock starting potentially, Pollard starting the big games in terms of World Cups in 2 years' time.
He's only 31.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. So you think
he's been around that long, you almost think he's like 33, 34.
He looks old because he's had so many stressful kicks to kick. He doesn't look as if he's stressed, but he must have been mentally inside. It must be getting him some grey hairs, all those big kicks he's had to nail. So I just think it's a really fascinating series because I think even like your islands, is it Prendergast? Is it Crowley? I think, again, Crowley stole a march at the minute, but you rewind 6 months ago, you'd say he's undroppable, Prendergast.
I've heard you say this before, that you always played your best rugby when you were confident that you were like the guy, when the head coach said to you, you're my guy, whatever happens, bit of a dip in form. With that in mind then, do you think these teams, we said South Africa have got 3 options, England got 3 or maybe even 4 options, the All Blacks 2 options, France, a couple of options, Wales, a couple of options. Do you think that these head coaches need to make their decisions sort of 2 years out from World Cup now?
Different stages, I think. But ultimately, I think yes, because I think your spine of your team has to be in place and almost play pretty much every week. And you look at South Africa, right? Spine of they created so much depth, but like spine of their team, it's either Bongi or Malcolm Marks, Etzebeth or Snyman play. Khaleesi plays all the time. And then you've got, you mix it up a little bit, 9 and 10 and things. But like, I don't know. I just feel like, I think at this point, especially given that the rankings are up for grabs, I do think that it's at some stage, maybe this autumn is the catalyst for these teams thinking, right, I'm going with player X, player Y. And for me, like I said, I always found that when I knew the shirt was mine and I knew that the coach was giving me back in to say, don't worry about mistakes. If you make a mistake, you're not going to not play the following week, or you're not going to get dropped if you have a couple of bad games or whatever. This is almost your team in a sense. I think you see players will go to the next level. So I think on that basis, I think the 10 that's going to have the biggest impact on his team this autumn is Sasha Feinberg Mngonu, because I think you've seen in the last couple of weeks, his game has gone to the next level. And I think when you play in a team as strong as that, he's going to get lots of good opportunities to showcase that. But also it feels, maybe for the first time in a little while, that it feels like, okay, you know, even when he come back and played for the Stormers, he's been like center of attention. He's been the star of the show. Almost like the hype around him's been there, hasn't it?
The new Dan Carter, they were saying.
He's got a fair way to go to get to that level, but he's certainly got the potential. But I just think he's got the ability in this autumn to really light the autumn up, and his potential and what he's shown. And I think just because of the way he's taken his game to the next level, looks as if it could be edging towards maybe him replacing Pollard as the go-to guy. But I think it's a really interesting debate, that 10, because, you know, barring Finn Russell and Intermac in France, everybody could argue that there's a couple of options to play 10.
The biggest question at 10 for me is what Andy Farrell does at 10 with Ireland, because he seemed to kind of make his choice last Six Nations, didn't he? You know, he started Prendergast in every game but one, I think, from memory.
And that was the end. That was the final game when they couldn't really win it as well, wasn't it? Yeah.
And then he's kind of reined that back in. Do you think he went sort of too early on Prendergast? Do you think he's kind of made that call now and he can't go back?
I think this is a really interesting debate, because I went back and looked at the Six Nations from last year. I remember I think it was round 2 where Prendergast played in Murrayfield and had man of the match. And he was brilliant in terms of how he pulled and the strings and how he sort of, you know, he outplayed Finn Russell that day. I know Finn Russell went off early with a head, but he was, you know, pulling the strings and the way Ireland attacked. So if you'd have said like, and then at the end of the day, he had a little bit of a difficult afternoon against France. Well, you name me one Irish player on that afternoon who didn't have a difficult afternoon. And I think, so up until that halfway through the second half in that France game, he's your man. You know what I mean? Yes, he has got a lot of work to do defensively. He'll know that. He's going to have to be better defensively if he's going to be Ireland's 10 for the next sort of 2 years and going into a World Cup. But I just think it's very much, it's like in the year, like Crowley the year before, won the Six Nations, was the guy who was sort of pulling the strings and winning that championship for them. Had half a difficult game against the All Blacks that evening and sort of, you know, almost lost his place from that. So I think those two, I think it'll be a little bit more form-based as opposed to really nailing their colours to the mast, if that makes sense. And I just think, as it stands at the minute, I think Crowley's performance last week and how Munster have started the season, for me, Crowley has looked like an international 10. And I think at the start of the year, Prendergast looks as if he's trying to get back to that sort of period that in the last Six Nations. And for me, I think if you're asking me who do I start in the Quilter Nations Series, I would say it's Crowley. And then I think you need to give him a run as well. You know, you probably look at him in terms of those 3 big games. I think you probably mix the team up a little bit for the Japan game with flying back, etc. But and also what's important in a team, when you play 10 in a team, you have to know that the team believe in the messages you're delivering. The team need to believe in the messages that you're delivering to them. And if you're only in for one game or 60 minutes and then you're back in for 20 minutes off the bench, it's really difficult to get your points and grab the team. You look at sort of like a George Ford, a Johnny Sexton, a Ronan O'Gara, those, like when those guys are in the team, everybody kind of knows it's their team. And when they speak, the messages are right, okay, this is his team. We're going to have to listen to him. When you're in and out, and I found that at the start of my career, I found like the messages I was delivering didn't really sort of sink in with certain players, because they were like, oh, well, next week they'll probably change your 10, or he's going to play the following week, etc. So I just think it's really important that for coaches, teams, squads, individuals, if you can sort of say, right, well, we know that this guy's going to be the main guy for the next however many years going to the World Cup, those messages will probably sink in a little bit better. And I think at the minute, probably Jack Crowley starts at 10 for Ireland.
All Blacks 10 jersey, probably the most famous 10 jersey, or one of the most famous 10 jerseys in all the game. They seem to be in a bit of a tricky spot at the minute because they can't really decide who they want to play there. Like you said earlier, they've got, in DMAC and Borden Barrett, they've got two 10/15s, but then you've also got
DMAC quite well as well. I was going to say, just checking.
But they've got two 10/15s there, but they've also got Will Jordan, who's probably the best fullback in the world. Yeah, I know he can also play wing, but they haven't got their 10 nailed on, and with Richie Mwanga not coming back until the end of next year, where does that leave them?
Well, I mean, it probably leads them in the position that they're in. They're still, like, you look at those two players who are just fabulous, fabulous rugby players, world-class rugby players. But they're probably, like, in terms of their selection at the minute, it's a little bit like that, isn't it? One game there, you look at the game they played against the Springboks at Eden Park, where they were brilliant in terms of managing the game. And then the following week, got absolutely done in Wellington by 40 points. So I just think it's maybe a little bit of a reflection of where New Zealand are, that, certainly the teams that I played against in New Zealand, you knew that it was Aaron Smith, Dan Carter, Nonu, Conrad Smith. You knew who was playing. And I think, again, that sort of goes back to it a little bit at the minute. Like, one week it's Bowden Barrett calling the shots, then it's Mackenzie calling the shots, and it's like, okay, where are the messages coming from? And they're probably not quite settled. And I think if you brought Richie Mwanga into that team, listening to a few people who everybody can see how good and world-class Richie Mwanga is, but just the influence he has on the team, I think it's almost like that would be Richie Mwanga's team, wouldn't it? If he went into the squad now. If he was available for this autumn, he'd almost probably slot in and it would feel like his team. But yeah, I think they're a little bit, we're talking about New Zealand. I think it's really, it's important to state that, like, because of the stupid heights that South Africa and the Springboks have got to, you're almost thinking, well, the All Blacks, who had sort of got lost by a point in the World Cup final a couple of years ago, sort of
after a red card,
are not a million miles away. They are going through a bit of a transition period, because New Zealand previously have been the absolute sort of standard bearers. But I just think they're a little bit of inconsistency. This is not a New Zealand, like, New Zealand wouldn't win one, lose two, win three, lose one.
It's not a crisis.
It's not a crisis. But I remember I was chatting to Ma Nonu, and Ma Nonu played 103 games for the All Blacks. How many games do you think he lost?
A handful.
8.
Jeez.
So you think, right, 103 games and you lose 8, that just smacks of consistency, success, etc. Whereas this All Blacks team probably isn't, and it probably is a little bit of a reflection of who'd you pick? Mackenzie one week, Barrett the next week, Jordan one week, Mackenzie at fullback the next week. It's kind of like it's a little bit like lacking a little bit of consistency in selection because of maybe where the calendar time of year before the World Cup and things like that. But they're still, they ranked 2 in the world, and beat the Springboks comfortably a couple of weeks ago in terms of in Eden Park, and still a fabulous, fabulous team who are going to be a huge draw and going to be right up there in this autumn. I expect them to have a really good autumn as well.
Well, thanks, mate.
It's good, that, wasn't it?
I'm ready for the autumn now.
Sofa for the next 4 weeks. Not moving off the sofa for the next
work.
Yeah, work. You just got to say it. It's work, isn't it? Watching rugby is now work.
Exactly. Well, don't wait for full time. Head to Go.Compare now to see what you could save. Cheers, Biggs.
Cheers, Rob.